You can try the pawn shop down the street, the branch manager said with a cold smile, sliding the withdrawal slip back across the counter. Laughter rippled quietly among the staff as Naomi Ellis, in her worn windbreaker and faded boots, stood silently, unmoved, unreadable. What none of them knew was that the woman they were mocking wasn't just a customer, she was their CEO, and she had just dialed the number that would end their careers. It was 9:07 a.m. when Naomi Ellis stepped through the glass doors of Halcyon Trust Bank's flagship branch in downtown Atlanta. The morning sun caught the polished marble floor and bounced off the crystal chandeliers that hung from the soaring ceiling, casting the entire lobby in a cold, pristine glow. She walked in alone, no driver, no assistant, no expensive handbag dangling from her arm. Just a faded leather crossbody and a worn pair of boots that had seen years of city sidewalks. Her windbreaker was zipped up to the collar, concealing the quiet power she carried with her. To the eye of any onlooker, she was just another middle-aged black woman running errands in a place where errand runners weren't supposed to belong. She walked with calm purpose straight to the service counter and handed over a filled-out withdrawal slip and her ID. The number written in steady, clear pen, $120,000. The teller, Rachel Kerr, barely 24, blinked hard when she saw it. Her eyes darted from the slip to Naomi's face, then slowly traveled down to the scuffed boots and back up to the windbreaker, as though confirming that this woman in front of her was clearly in the wrong place. Behind Rachel, Ethan Rowe glanced up from his stack of deposit folders. He saw Rachel's look and smirked before nudging Spencer Lang, who leaned in to see the source of the disruption. "You think she knows how many zeros that even is?" Ethan murmured, not bothering to whisper. Spencer chuckled under his breath. "Maybe it's one of those sweepstakes things. Claim your prize here." The joke slid easily into the air, and though Rachel kept her face composed, her shoulders tensed with unease. Naomi didn't say a word. She stood tall, her eyes steady, her hands resting calmly on the counter. But she had heard them. Every syllable. And she had felt it, like an old, familiar chill sliding down her spine. It wasn't new. It never was. Class masked as policy. Prejudice dressed in professionalism. They didn't see a customer. They saw a question mark. A threat. A mistake. And that mistake, they thought, needed to be stalled, scrutinized, silenced. "Ma'am," Rachel finally said, her voice tight behind the fake smile, "I'm going to need a moment to verify this transaction. If you could please take a seat, someone will be with you shortly." Naomi gave a polite nod and stepped away from the counter without hesitation. The chairs in the lobby were stiff-backed and set just far enough apart to make conversation uncomfortable. She chose the one nearest to the window, where sunlight poured in but couldn't quite warm the sterile air. From there, she observed. A white man in an Armani suit walked in minutes later, checked his Rolex, and was immediately greeted by a staff member. "Right this way, Mr. Collins," she said cheerfully. "No number. No wait." He was ushered into a private room before his shoes even had time to scuff the floor. Then came a young woman in athleisure and a $2,000 purse. Laughed with the receptionist, left in 5 minutes with a thick envelope in hand. But when a janitor in blue overalls came in to cash a small check, he was asked for 2 forms of ID and told to step aside. Naomi didn't need a training manual to know what was happening. She'd lived this system. Knew its codes. She could see the silent calculations behind each smile, every gesture, worth serving. Worth watching. Worth doubting. She leaned back, watching the performance unfold like a tired play in an expensive theater. And still, no one approached her. Time ticked. 15 minutes. 23. 37. Every second added to the weight of the moment they were blindly creating. Naomi's phone buzzed once in her jacket pocket. She pulled it out slowly, dialed a single number, and brought it to her ear. "Carla," she said calmly. "It's Naomi. I'm at branch 1. It's time." She hung up. No drama. No threats. Just a ripple, barely noticeable on the surface, but underneath, the entire ocean had just shifted. Back at the front desk, Ethan and Spencer stood casually against the teller station, trading smirks as they watched her from a distance. Rachel occasionally glanced over her shoulder but avoided Naomi's gaze. At last, the branch manager emerged. Victoria Graves. Impeccably dressed in a slate gray skirt suit, her platinum blonde hair coiled into a sleek twist. She walked with the confidence of someone who had long ago decided that the marble floor belonged to her. "Ms.," she said, glancing down at the slip in her hand. "Ellis." "Yes." Her smile was cold and brittle. "You'll have to understand, of course, that we can't just process large withdrawals without proper verification. Especially for amounts of this nature." Naomi met her eyes, unmoving. All required documents were submitted. Yes, well, Victoria hesitated just long enough to betray the discomfort behind her polished exterior. "Sometimes we advise customers to consider alternatives, check cashing locations, for example. They're typically more accustomed to non-standard transactions." A pause hung in the air, thick with implication. Naomi's lips parted into a faint smile. The kind of smile that meant danger was near. "Are you refusing to process my withdrawal?" "Of course not," Victoria replied, quickly. "Just offering suggestions." "Then I'll continue to wait," Naomi said softly, and turned back to her chair. Victoria stood there for a moment longer, unable to shake the growing tension. Something about this woman's calm unnerved her. Something didn't fit. But instead of seeing warning signs, she saw only inconvenience. Something to dismiss. 10 minutes later, Rachel finally called Naomi back to the counter, her face pale. Spencer had returned to mocking posture, arms folded, waiting to swoop in. "Ma'am," Rachel said stiffly, "we're still running some background processing on this request." Naomi placed her hand lightly on the counter and leaned in, her voice low and unmistakably clear. "Then let's proceed by policy, shall we? Or perhaps I should wait until your executive VP arrives." That moment was when Rachel flinched. When Spencer's arms dropped. When Ethan's smirk vanished. Because none of them had mentioned Carla Jennings. And yet, Naomi had. Naomi stepped back again, returning to her chair as if nothing had happened. But the tension in the air had shifted. Customers could feel it. The front desk grew quieter. Employees started glancing nervously toward the door. And then, 20 minutes later, it opened. A single pair of heels clicked across the marble with sharp, deliberate rhythm. Not fast. Not rushed. But unstoppable. Carla Jennings entered the branch lobby with a presence that turned every head. Her tailored navy suit cut sharp against the light. Her face unreadable. And in 3 strides, she reached Naomi, nodded, then slowly turned to face the counter. "Where is your manager?" she asked, her voice calm but dangerous. Rachel's mouth opened. Spencer froze. Ethan took a small step back. Victoria emerged from her glass office, confusion flickering briefly before panic began to bloom. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm Carla Jennings," she said. "Executive Vice President. And that woman," she pointed, "is Naomi Ellis, Chief Executive Officer of Halcyon Trust Bank. The woman you delayed, mocked, and tried to turn away from her own branch." The lobby fell silent. Rachel gasped. Spencer's jaw dropped. Ethan turned pale. And Victoria, once so poised, stood stunned, her mouth slightly open, breath shallow. Naomi rose quietly, dusting off her jacket like she was brushing off a storm. But the storm hadn't even started yet. The marble silence that followed Carla Jennings's revelation was absolute. No one moved. No one even breathed. It was as if time itself had slammed to a halt inside the grand lobby of Halcyon Trust Bank's flagship branch. Naomi Ellis, the woman they'd ignored, doubted, insulted, and quietly laughed at, now stood revealed as the very CEO of the institution they served. And she didn't have to raise her voice. Her presence alone, in that navy windbreaker and worn leather bag, was louder than any outburst could ever be. Victoria Graves' perfectly polished facade cracked instantly. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her eyes darted to Rachel Kerr, then to Ethan and Spencer, both of whom looked like they'd been slapped. Rachel took a shaky step backward, her face pale. Behind the counter, other employees froze in place, desperately trying to figure out whether to run, apologize, or pretend they weren't part of this disaster. Carla Jennings, calm and measured, let the silence hang for a moment longer before she spoke again, this time addressing the entire branch. "We've been watching the live surveillance feed since 9:30 this morning," she said. "The entire board. Every camera. Every microphone. Every word. Every smirk." She turned slowly, letting her words echo through the cold, luxurious space. "We saw you stall Ms. Ellis's transaction without cause. We saw the jokes. We saw the mockery. We saw the unequal treatment of customers based on clothing, speech, or skin." Carla's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It was the sound of an avalanche, quiet until it crushes everything in its path. "The woman you told to go to a check cashing shop is the same woman who saved this bank from collapse 5 years ago. The woman who turned 3 failing branches into market leaders. The woman who started here, at this very location, mopping these floors when none of you could even spell halcyon." Naomi stood beside Carla, her face expressionless. Not smug. Not angry. Just still. Like a storm whose eye had just reached the center of town. And then the elevator dinged again. The board had arrived. 4 men and 2 women in tailored suits stepped through the glass doors with expressions carved from stone. Jonathan Ames, chairman of the board, scanned the room with a gaze that could slice steel. Behind him, Catherine Shaw, head of compliance, was already pulling up digital files on her tablet. Carla stepped aside as they moved into the center of the lobby. Jonathan's voice was sharp. "Ms. Graves," he said, addressing the branch manager, "step forward." Victoria's legs seemed made of glass as she walked toward the center, each step echoing like a funeral bell. "Do you have anything to say?" he asked. Her voice was small, trembling. "I didn't know who she was. I was following standard policy." "Stop," Catherine interrupted, holding up a screen. "Policy doesn't include suggesting customers visit a pawn shop. It doesn't include delaying a verified transaction for nearly 40 minutes while you smile at men in Rolexes and ignore janitors. It doesn't include allowing staff to laugh at clients in plain view of surveillance cameras." Victoria's lip quivered. "It was never about race, it was about power." Naomi spoke for the first time, stepping forward. Her voice, low and even, carried through the chamber like gospel. "You thought I had none, so you gave me none. You made assumptions based on my shoes, my bag, my jacket. But I could have walked in here barefoot, and it still wouldn't have justified the way I was treated." Naomi turned slightly, her gaze landing on Ethan and Spencer. "You," she said. "You whispered jokes. You mocked a woman asking for her own money. You turned public service into private ridicule." Spencer Lang, who just an hour earlier had mimed a phone call in mockery, now looked ready to vomit. Ethan Rowe's jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. Carla gestured to a security officer. "Their badges, now." The officer approached, holding out his hand. Ethan stared at him for a moment, like he couldn't comprehend what was happening. Spencer looked to Victoria, as if she might save him. She didn't. One by one, their ID cards dropped into the officer's hand. No argument. No excuses. Just the soft, humiliating sound of plastic meeting leather. Carla turned to Rachel. "Ms. Kerr." Rachel's shoulders tightened, her breath hitched. She stammered. I didn't laugh. I didn't." Naomi raised a hand gently, stopping her. "You hesitated. That matters. I saw it. You looked at me the way someone does when they know something's wrong but feel powerless to stop it. And that hesitation is why I'm not firing you." The words hung in the air like thunder after lightning. Rachel blinked in disbelief. "You're not?" Naomi nodded. You're going to fix this branch. As interim manager. A gasp rippled through the staff. Rachel's eyes widened. Me? You, Carla confirmed. Because you've seen firsthand how this culture rots from the inside. And because change doesn't start with perfect people, it starts with people willing to be better. Rachel clutched the counter to stay upright. Naomi turned to face the rest of the room. Customers. Staff. Executives. Let today be very clear, she said. This isn't about one moment or one mistake. It's about the pattern. The way we let quiet prejudice pass as policy. The way we dress arrogance in silk and call it leadership. That ends now. Jonathan stepped forward. Effective immediately, Halcyon Trust Bank is launching a formal investigation into service discrepancies and internal culture across all branches. This branch will serve as the first case study and warning. Then he turned to Naomi, offering a solemn nod. Madam CEO, he said. With your permission, we'd like you to lead the new task force for ethical reform. Naomi returned the nod. I already have a plan. And with that, the meeting, if it could be called that, was over. Ethan and Spencer were escorted out, their heads down, their names already scrubbed from the system. Victoria Graves followed minutes later, no longer in control of anything, her once firm heels reduced to echoes of a fallen reputation. Rachel Kerr, still trembling, took her first walk as acting manager to the center of the lobby, where she began giving calm, professional instructions to resume operations. She didn't ask permission. She didn't need to. Because now, everyone knew what real leadership looked like. Naomi didn't stay to gloat. She simply turned, thanked Carla, and walked back toward the doors she had entered hours before, now, with the full weight of the institution behind her. And behind her, left in the hush of the marble lobby, was a space that would never be the same again. The glass doors of Halcyon Trust Bank's flagship branch closed softly behind Naomi Ellis, but the ripple of what had just occurred inside was already echoing through every level of the institution. Her quiet exit wasn't the end, it was the beginning of something much bigger than one confrontation, one firing, or one act of humiliation reversed. This was the ignition of a movement. As Naomi stepped into the crisp Atlanta air, her phone buzzed. Carla Jennings was already calling from HQ. We need to move fast, Carla said. The footage is being reviewed by legal and PR. The board is rattled, but they're listening. Naomi didn't miss a step. Schedule a full executive briefing in 1 hour. I'll have the plan ready. She didn't need to draft it. It had lived inside her for years, growing stronger every time she watched a bank teller look through a customer or heard another story about someone denied dignity because they didn't wear the right shoes. Within 24 hours, Naomi stood at the head of the sleek boardroom at Halcyon headquarters, the same room that once kept people like her far from the table. Now, she was at its center. Around her, a dozen board members sat in stunned silence as she laid out the Equity and Ethics Overhaul Program, a $50 million initiative that would flip Halcyon's priorities upside down. From this day forward, Naomi began, performance evaluations will not be based solely on profit, loan volume, or new account quotas. They will be based on fairness, dignity, respect. She clicked to the next slide, revealing a new scoring system. Each branch would now receive a Fair Service Index, updated monthly based on secret shopper audits, verified customer feedback, and internal whistleblower reports. Every employee will know that their treatment of every single customer matters, she continued. Bonuses will be tied to equity scores. Promotions will require verified excellence in fair service. Any pattern of discrimination, documented or reported, will trigger immediate review. Dennis Clark, one of the more conservative board members, raised a hand. This is aggressive. And it puts us at risk. What happens when the media starts digging? Naomi didn't flinch. They already are, she said. And they're going to see a bank that confronted its own failure and chose to rebuild with integrity. Or they're going to see a bank that buried its head in the sand. I won't lead the second kind. Catherine Shaw, head of compliance, leaned forward. "We'll need legal buy-in. And HR will scream." "Then let them," Naomi replied. "Or let them find a new job." The room fell into deep silence until Jonathan Ames, the chairman, nodded once. "Put it into motion. Full implementation. You have our vote." And with that, the culture of Halcyon Trust Bank began to shift. Training manuals were rewritten. Posters went up in every break room across 312 branches nationwide, each one bearing the new core principle in bold: every customer. Equal respect. No exceptions. But Naomi didn't stop there. She installed a new digital portal on the Halcyon website, direct communication with the CEO's office. No screening. No red tape. If a customer felt mistreated, Naomi wanted to hear about it directly. The industry laughed at first. Competing executives whispered that she was naive, soft, maybe even reckless. But then the numbers began to change. Branches that had once underperformed began to see loyalty rise. In Cleveland, a small branch saw a 14% increase in returning customers after its manager instituted weekly listening sessions with frontline staff. In San Antonio, a teller who had previously been passed over for promotion was recognized for identifying a colleague's pattern of biased service and rewarded, not punished. A culture of silence was unraveling, and in its place came a quiet revolution built on accountability. Naomi didn't hide in a high-rise office to watch the change unfold. She hit the road. Every week, she visited a different branch. No prior announcement. No formal entourage. Just Naomi, in her usual windbreaker and leather bag, walking into lobbies as a regular customer. Sometimes she waited in line. Sometimes she watched from a chair. What mattered most was that she saw people for who they were and saw how they were being treated. In Charlotte, North Carolina, she watched a young teller named Melody gently assist an elderly woman confused about her mortgage. No rush. No sighs. Just patience. Naomi returned the next day in her blazer and heels to commend the branch publicly. In Oakland, California, she witnessed a manager quietly dismiss a complaint from a black single mother trying to open a business account. That manager was gone within a week. Real consequences. Real trust. The media noticed. Business Insider ran a feature titled "Halcyon Trust, the Bank That Chose Conscience." The Wall Street Journal praised the new model, citing it as the first real innovation in service metrics in decades. Still, not everyone applauded. Internally, some high-level executives resisted. A few tried to derail the program, arguing it hurt profitability. Naomi met with them directly, presenting cold numbers. "Fairness is not a cost," she told them. "It's our best investment." Meanwhile, customer satisfaction ratings soared. Complaints dropped. And more importantly, people who had once avoided banks entirely, immigrants, low-income families, formerly incarcerated individuals, began walking through Halcyon's doors with a new sense of dignity. But the moment that confirmed to Naomi they were on the right path came quietly, in a small branch in Memphis, Tennessee. She had stopped in on a rainy Thursday afternoon, dressed as always in her simple attire. She waited in line behind a teenage boy and his grandfather. The boy joked nervously with the teller, a young Latino man with soft eyes and a name tag that read Luis M. When it was her turn, Naomi handed over a check to deposit and watched as Luis handled it professionally, respectfully, without once making assumptions. As he handed her the receipt, he hesitated, then leaned forward slightly. "Miss Ellis," he said, voice low but firm, "I recognized you." Naomi didn't react. Luis continued, "I just wanted to say, thank you. You gave people like me a voice in this industry." Naomi met his gaze. He wasn't speaking from fear. He was speaking from pride. That night, as she walked out of the branch and into the golden southern dusk, Naomi paused on the sidewalk. The neon Halcyon Trust sign glowed behind her, not just as a brand, but as a promise. She knew there would still be resistance. There would still be those who clung to the old ways, to quiet bias and polished exclusion. But something had shifted, something permanent. This wasn't just a change in policy. It was a change in identity. A revolution in what a bank could be. And for the first time in decades, Naomi Ellis allowed herself a full, quiet smile. Not of victory, but of conviction. Because the foundation had been shaken, and from its cracks, something honest had begun to grow. Something worthy of trust. Something worthy of every single customer who had ever been told, without words, that they didn't belong. That chapter was over. And Naomi Ellis was writing the next one. In a world where appearances often dictate how we are treated, the story of Naomi Ellis reminds us that true power doesn't wear labels, it carries integrity. Naomi walked into that grand marble lobby not needing anyone's validation. She had already earned it through decades of perseverance, resilience, and results. But the lesson isn't just about her status as CEO. It's about the fact that she didn't reveal that power until the very moment it needed to be used, for justice, not for ego. Too often, people are judged by their clothing, skin color, or the quiet way they carry themselves. Too often, institutions value profit over people and allow bias to fester under the surface of professionalism. What Naomi did wasn't just stand up for herself, she stood up for everyone who's ever been looked down on, dismissed, or treated as less than. Her story teaches us this: the most meaningful change doesn't come from loud speeches, it comes from silent endurance, clear vision, and action at the right moment. Whether you're leading a company, working a frontline job, or just trying to be seen for who you are, never forget your worth is not defined by what others assume. It's defined by what you choose to carry with you each day: fairness, humility, and courage. If you've ever been made to feel small, remember Naomi's quiet strength. And if you're ever in a position of power, remember the responsibility that comes with it. Power is not about control, it's about service. It's about standing for what's right, especially when it's inconvenient, unpopular, or uncomfortable. To our viewers here at US Daily Story, thank you for taking the time to listen, reflect, and grow with us. Your support makes it possible for us to share stories that matter, stories that challenge the norms, speak truth to injustice, and remind us that everyday people can ignite extraordinary change. If Naomi's journey inspired you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement today, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next powerful story. Together, let's keep lifting up voices that deserve to be heard and building a world where fairness isn't a luxury, but a standard.